Have you ever looked at your relationship and thought, this is not what I signed up for? That your idea of marriage doesn't line up with reality? Well, on today's show, we're looking at the myths of marriage and how falling victim to these myths might be impacting the health of your relationship. It's all coming up right now on Love Lessons.
Real life. Real talk. Real relationships. Faith-based tips, tricks, and challenges to improve your marriage and change your life. It's the Love Lessons podcast with your hosts, Christian counselors and marriage experts, Dr. Zach and Blair Gammon.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 4, Marriage Myths.
I am really excited about this topic because this is something that a lot of people struggle with and maybe don't even realize they struggle with.
I know the current myth that I've got in my head.
Ooh, what's that?
Actually, I think it's truth and you would think it's a myth.
Okay.
That I have to have Starbucks every day.
Ooh, that's definitely a myth. Our bank account would tell you that's also a myth. You want to hear my current favorite myth?
What is it?
It's that everyone loves fun facts. When the reality is that maybe I'm the only one. You want to hear today's fun fact? Because it talks about this, specifically related to myths.
Okay.
So here it is. So in a study of divorced people, 45% of the respondents said that unrealistic expectations in their marriage, either by them or their partner, was a major contributor to the end of their marriage.
Wow.
Nearly half of the people who were divorced said that was a major contributor to the end of their marriage.
So it's a good thing that we're talking about unrealistic expectations along with marriage myths.
Right.
Try to bring some truth to what our relationships should look like.
Right.
So before we jump into common marriage myths, I think it's important that we actually look at what is a myth and what impact those can have on our relationships, why we don't need to believe those. So first off, a myth is by definition just a widely held belief that is false, that is untrue. And so if we fall into that category where we believe untrue things, then that's going to cause a plethora of issues in our relationships.
Yeah, so the problem with believing these myths, right, is that when we believe them, we use them as a blueprint or a benchmark for what our relationship should look like. And if our view of what our relationship should look like is built on a lie, then the relationship's doomed to fail. Right? So we see things in pop culture, a cute little rom-com that makes you feel good because after these two people have done all the wrong things, suddenly the man does something right. Or, you've got a trashy romance novel that makes it look like every single moment of your life should be like super intense and passionate, or a song that talks about, I don't know, how your wife left and your dog left and your truck left and it's a real sad country song. Whatever it is, we believe these lies based on the stuff that we hear, right? Because we set our basis for truth in the world, when in reality, we should be setting it on the Word.
Absolutely. So what we do is we actually set ourselves up for unrealistic expectations on our relationship, but also that we place on our partner. So going back to your example here of a romance novel, if the love interest, the male love interest, for example, is eloquently conveying how much he loves and adores the female love interest in this romance novel, a woman might leave reading that novel thinking, why doesn't my husband say all these things to me? He says, I love you, and rolls over and starts snoring and goes to sleep. And he doesn't do all the things that they do in this romance novel. And what I'll say is, sis, a woman wrote that. A woman is the one who came up with that dialogue. That wasn't even a man coming up with it. That's not even coming from a man's brain. So are you comparing your spouse to a, fictitious character in a book or in a movie when that's not actually how real life relationships work? That is the highlight reel. That's the hope. That's not the reality. So we don't want to dash everyone's hopes and dreams, but we also want to show you that there's a realistic way that relationships occur, and it's usually not the highlight reel that we see on social media or the good parts of people's marriage that they want us to see, or what's on TV or in books. What does actual true relationships look like?
And I think it's important to recognize too that a lot of these myths that we see are based on half-truths, right? My husband should always love and adore me. Yes, he should. But the reality is that you should love and honor your husband too, right? My wife should want to take care of me. Yes, that's true. But you should also honor and adore her, right? And so when one of those things get out of balance, then everything gets thrown off. And the reality is that we're imperfect humans, and so we're going to mess it up. And so if you walk around believing that myth that, you should always be adored and cherished, or you should always be taken care of and honored and respected, you're just setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah, because when you're not, then there's dissatisfaction and anger and resentment, and why am I not being taken care of? I deserve better. And then sometimes that can cause us to look at, the whole grass is greener on the other side concept. And that's a myth too, guys. But we can start looking elsewhere to meet our needs because we feel like they're not getting met at home.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of these myths. Okay. Number one, I think, is a big one. It's something that I see, honestly, almost every time that a couple comes in for marriage counseling. And it is the myth that changing a relationship requires two people. Yeah. The fact of the matter is that one person can make a significant change in the relationship, right? So I've used this example before, maybe on this podcast, but if I start doing meth and you don't do anything, you continue doing what you're doing, that's still going to have a negative impact on the relationship, right? If I start buying you flowers every day, that's going to have an impact on the relationship, even if you don't do anything, right? You might feel happier or more loved and valued as long as you don't see our bank account because of how expensive it is. But those little changes in a relationship, or even big changes in a relationship, can come from one person. It's ideal when both people want to see a relationship.
Right. And that's what people want.
Right. But again, what's ideal doesn't always match reality. Right. And so it's important to understand that myth going in and understand the role that you're playing and if you're contributing to that myth, because here's what ends up happening a lot of times. I see people going one of two directions. Number one is that the person doubles down and they try to force the other person to change. They think if I just try harder, they're going to focus more, right? I mean, how often do you see that when couples come in where one person they're in hyper control mode, right. Not demeaning kind of way, but they're trying all these different ways to get the other person to see their point of view to fix the relationship, right?
So I'm going to send them books or podcasts about the things that I've talked to them about. I'm going to say, did you read it? I need you to read it. I need you to listen to it. Did you do this? Did you do that? I need, just trying to control their behavior, and it's behavior modification that we're trying to do.
Right. And then the other option is the other end of the spectrum, right? It is, I am just going to throw my hands up and say, well, there's no point in trying here because they're not trying and nobody cares, so I'm not going to care either.
They don't care about me. I'm not going to care about the relationship.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And you sound like a 12-year-old.
Yeah. It's pursuer and distancer.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so you have to understand that if you want to see meaningful relationship change, then you have to be willing to do meaningful change on your own, right? And I mean, again, so many things that we talk about here relates to codependency, but if you are so focused on getting the other person to make the changes you want them to see while not focusing on your own change, then you're just setting the situation up for failure. That's codependency. That's not relationship change. And something that I hear often when people try to justify their reason for doing this is they'll say, now, don't get me wrong, I've made a lot of mistakes and I'm not the best spouse, but... Yeah. And then they start talking about everything that the other person's doing. And I'm like, when you put that but in there, you just invalidated everything that you said.
That actually goes into myth number 2, which is if I try harder, I can change my spouse.
Yes.
We are only able and responsible to change ourselves. We are only responsible for our own behavior. And so just like you said, when we try to do that, impose our will on another person and try to control them, then there's a lot of dysfunction that takes place there.
Yeah.
And we have to be aware that we're even doing that controlling behavior. I'll meet with people and they'll say, but I'm not controlling. And then they'll give me a list of all the ways that they are. And I'm like, you're not self-aware that you're even doing this, are you? If you come in and you have an issue, then let's figure out how you're contributing to it. Because if you tell me my spouse does A, B, C, D, and E, then I'm going to go, okay, what are you doing? Because two people it takes to change, but they're also, both parties can usually most of the time contribute to the dysfunction. Now, maybe one some more than the other, depending on the circumstances, if there's some sort of addiction or something. But both parties have a role in this.
Yeah.
Both parties play. So my question is, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
And are you self-aware of what you're doing and how can you control yourself and not your spouse? Where are your boundaries at?
I had a counselor one time I heard them say, when they had a couple that would come in and, just using an example, the husband had cheated on the wife. The first thing that she would do was look at the wife and say, what did you do wrong? Now, I don't want all the feminists to come out of the woodwork. Point is that if you're here because you want to seek reconciliation, your husband did a whole lot that it's going to have to be worked through, but you're not perfect either. And maybe you didn't do anything to contribute to him. You didn't force him to go out and have an affair. That's on him. Yes, but you have also contributed to relationship dysfunction. And she did it not to make someone feel bad because their husband did something wrong, but it's very jarring when you're asked that question, and it really forces you to think, okay, so have I contributed something to the negativity of this relationship? His choices are his, but I might still be contributing. Right. And it was, when I heard that, I was like, ooh, and I don't like it, but it's true, right? So, and again, it's worth pointing out, it's worth saying that ideally two people do change a relationship or change in a relationship, right? But if you are so focused on getting the other person to put forth the change, then you're not really worried about changing yourself. And I have never once seen a couple come into marriage counseling that both people didn't have something that could be worked on. Yeah. Right? So if you're dragging your spouse because they need to do the work and to change, then you're kind of missing the whole point, and you're really setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah. And we tell you this as people who have struggled with this myth personally ourselves. Yeah. We got very, very young and didn't really know who we were as persons, what our identity was in Christ, all of that stuff. And then, add in some childhood dysfunction, a little bit of glitter there, and then you have this beautiful picture of us trying to control the other person and modify each other's behavior. Yeah. And so until we realized, okay, this isn't working, why am I hitting my head against the wall expecting different results? It finally took us realizing that to be able to allow room for the other person to actually make change. Yeah. Because a lot of times when we try to control people into change, they're going to rebel and do the exact opposite.
Absolutely.
And so you wanting them to do something different is only, and trying to force their hand and control that, it's only going to push them away further.
Exactly.
We don't realize that, though.
Right. Let me offer a little aside here that's sort of related but sort of not. If you are married to someone who is very laid back about everything, they're a pretty quiet person and not a whole lot ruffles their feather. Let's say you've been married to this person 5, 10, or 15 years. You're not going to drag this person to marriage counseling and convince them to suddenly care about everything. I can't tell you how many times that I've seen couples, and this is not just a man issue or a woman issue. Right. I've seen it on both sides of the fence. Yeah. So get those automatic thoughts out of your head as I'm describing this. But if your spouse seems very disinterested and they're like, oh, I don't know, I don't care, and you try to talk about stuff and they don't ever want to talk about stuff, or you start talking about feelings and you see them shutting down, dragging them to marriage counseling is not suddenly going to change who they are to get them to start opening up, right? Now, if you're someone who struggled with trauma or you struggled with something bad and your response has always been to stuff down, then yes, we can work through that. But if your spouse is somebody who's generally quiet, don't drag them to marriage counseling trying to get them to open up. Because if they're not going to open up when it's you one-on-one, they're certainly not going to do it when it's two-on-one, right? That's not the point of marriage counseling.
Yeah, and if you're trying to force them to be somebody that they're not, my question here is, have they always been this way? And why are you frustrated with it now? You knew what you married. Did you go into it thinking that you would change that one area of them and that they would change, and now you're frustrated because they haven't after all these years? That's not to say, again, that counseling can't help, but you're not going to coerce the counselor into forcing your spouse to change.
Right.
And that's the other thing. I can't change you. I've tried, so I'm going to take you to counseling and see if they can change.
Right. Girl, if he ain't wearing a diaper, you can't change him.
And that's it. And it's not my responsibility as a counselor to change your husband or your wife.
Or their diaper.
Or their diaper.
So the next myth is one that we see often, and especially with younger couples, right? My spouse will be everything to me. My spouse is going to take care of everything. They're going to heal all the childhood wounds. They're going to fill every gap that I've ever had. And the problem is that, number one, this is not based in reality, but then number two, our expectations tend to just fuel that fire even more, right? And so going back into the previous myths that we've talked about, they just start piling on, right? And they create this version of this person in our head that's supposed to be perfect, that's supposed to do all of this for me, and it sets us up for failure.
Yeah, because that person can never do those things.
Right.
And so then you have a negative experience and feel like that person doesn't care about you or love you or can't meet your needs. And then that process continues. And so over time, you have all of this anger, resentment, animosity that this person doesn't care and love you and isn't everything to you because they're not doing what it is you think they should do.
Yeah.
When we really need to have a healthy outlook on what that is.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. Can somebody be your sexual partner and your housekeeper and your partner in parenting and, all of these different things? Like when you look at the list of what a spouse is, can that person meet all of those needs every single time?
At 100% capacity.
Can they be everything to you?
No.
No, it's unrealistic.
Right. So, it makes sense when you think about it, why people feel this way, right? Like when you get into a relationship with somebody and you're dating, like you're just infatuated with this person. They're the most attractive person that you've ever seen, and everything about them is wonderful, and all of those little quirks that all their exes found cute or found frustrating, you find cute. And so there's this just it's new and it's exciting and it's fun. And then sometimes within the dating relationship, but certainly after people get married, there's like this period of disillusionment almost, where suddenly you realize, oh, this person is not perfect. And so when you reach this stage, this is where you determine whether this is going to develop into something healthy or you're going to create some of these unrealistic expectations, right? So you could dive in and you can try to change your spouse or get them to be what you wanted them to be, how you imagined they would be when you were thinking they should be everything to you. Or you go what's hopefully a more healthy direction and accept the fact that they're not a perfect person, right? And
Just like you're not.
Right, exactly.
We seem to miss that person.
We give ourselves a whole lot of grace for messing up and yet hold that back from the other person, right?
And say we do the opposite. To be honest. I know I'm not perfect.
Mm-hmm. But
Do you?
Right.
Have you really considered what that looks like?
Yeah.
So this next myth, my partner should meet all of my needs, is very similar to the last one we talked about. My partner should be everything to me. And so it's very similar. We hold them to these unrealistic expectations that they should meet all of our needs and our desires when that's not actually their role. And so when you look at it, if my need is to feel valued, for example, Blair needs to feel valued, Zach can greatly contribute to that. There are a lot of things that you can do to make me feel valued. But at the end of the day, my value is not based on what you do for me or what you think of me. It's not a you issue. My value and my self-concept is a me issue. And so when we place our needs on another person, we're not taking any responsibility ourselves for how we get those needs met. And more importantly, we're not figuring out where God even is in any of that and what his role in getting those needs of ours met.
If you are seeking to get your needs met, especially when it comes to worth and value, outside of the Holy Spirit working within you, the person who placed that value within you to begin with, then you're just setting yourself and your spouse up for failure. So that's a really good example for you, right? That was something that we struggled with in our relationship early on, is that you needed to feel valued. You needed to have some sense of self-worth. And one of the challenges, I think, for you is that you didn't even know how to put that into words, because it wasn't even, you didn't even realize that was a need that you had, right? And then for me personally, I have this need just to feel loved, because, I had an absentee parent, and she was gone. My mother was gone for most of my life growing up. And then, passed away shortly before we got married. So there was not even an opportunity for healing and reconciliation in our relationship, right? And so, not that I needed you to be my mother, but I placed a very high expectation on you to meet all of the needs of this like brokenness that I had inside of me, without even realizing it, right? So here you are on one side of the fence, and you're needing to feel valued and to feel worthy, and I can't give that to you because of my own brokenness, where I'm trying to pull from you to feel loved. And we just created this very chaotic relationship where we were both trying to pull from the other person to meet needs that we didn't even A, know how to quantify and put into words, and B, didn't even know how to get those needs met in a healthy way to begin with. And so there's nothing that you can offer because you're trying to get your tank filled up. There's nothing I can offer because I'm trying to get my tank filled up. And so it just created this distance between us. And every time that we tried to get closer to each other, we ended up just putting up another wall, right?
And so the goal in a healthy relationship is I'm not going to worry about my tank getting filled up because I'm going to focus on filling up my spouse's. And in return, they're not going to worry about getting their tank filled up by themselves. They're going to focus on their spouse. And so if you're focusing, each of you are focusing on the other person, your tank, your love tank, I know it's corny, but it's true. You know, that is getting filled up. It's just not by you. You're not meeting your own needs. And that way you're doing that selfless love to another person. And everyone's still happy and fulfilled.
This episode of the Love Lessons podcast is brought to you by Revive Counseling Center. Revive provides faith-based counseling services to help people find spiritual, emotional, and physical wellness. With multiple in-person locations, as well as convenient online counseling options, Revive Counseling Center has helped countless marriages and individuals find help and healing, allowing people to create fulfilling and thriving relationships, reviving hope and restoring lives. Learn more at revivecounseling.org.
I have a fun fact.
Okay.
Someone that I happen to be married to often likes to make us get some sketchy massages from some sketchy places when we go places. Do you know anything about this?
Listen, I'm just trying to get a deal. I'm just trying to get a massage on the cheap.
Oh, they've been on the cheap. And there have been some experiences.
I'm sorry, but have you enjoyed them all?
Honestly, no.
Oh, I really thought we liked them. That's why I keep doing it.
You keep doing it because it's funny. Let me set the stage for some folks. Okay.
Shame.
So these are my two favorite ones. Okay. So a few years ago, we were in Mexico. We were on a cruise and we had just gotten off the boat, right? And my dear, sweet, loving wife, as we're on the shuttle where we had gotten dropped off from the ship, and we're going to where we're supposed to be going, informs me that we are going to get a massage when we arrive. And that's all that I know. And so we get off of the shuttle, and some lady who I think the only English word she knew was massage, is just shouting it at people. And my wife took her up on it.
It was cheap. It was like $20 for an hour.
For like both of us.
Yeah.
Right. So let me just create a visual here. All right.
Yeah.
So this is, if you're listening to this in the car with kids in the car, this is the time to turn this off. So we go into this little, I would call it a hut.
It was like a shed.
Yes, a massage shed. And so we walk into the massage shed, and there are 4 beds, or massage tables, I guess is what they're called. It's in the massage shed. It's definitely a bed. 2 spots were available, and then there was another couple. I'm assuming there were a couple. It was a man and a woman who was in there getting a massage. Okay, and not having ever had a massage in Mexico, I've literally been in Mexico for all of 30 minutes at this point. I'm not sure what the custom is, but these folks were just butt naked. And so I walk in to the massage shed, and I saw more of these 2 people than I ever wanted to see. There's just boobs laid out on the bed.
Well, so if you get a massage in America, generally there is a sheet that they give you, a full-size sheet.
They don't have sheets in the massage shed.
So all they had was like a sheet on the table, that tray that they changed out between people.
They didn't.
And then they gave you what was the equivalent of like a hand towel to cover up your body. And you had to choose which parts to cover up with the hand towel, which is why the lady was showing her breasts because she chose wisely, to be honest.
Listen, when you walk into the massage shed and you see that, you don't use a cute little word like breast. She had her boobs out.
There was a lot going on in the shed. So there were 4 beds.
The dude, by the way, let me just mention, chose not to use the towel.
There was a lot, yeah.
Yeah.
So that should have been the time that I was like, let's get out of this. Like, we don't need to do this.
But we didn't.
But in typical Blair fashion, I bulldozed right through it and said, no, we're going to do this.
Yeah. And so we opted to keep our bathing suits on.
She was trying to get me to take it off.
Right.
And I was like, no, ma'am.
Right.
No, ma'am.
Right. So anyway, we proceeded to get Mexican massages in the massage shed. Mostly clothed, beside the naked folks who were not clothed. It was very uncomfortable.
It was so tiny in there. The beds. And it were 4 women, and they were bumping into each other.
Yes.
You could feel the other massage therapist, her arm like brushing.
Yeah.
She moved it.
I mean, the room was like maybe like 7 feet by 7 feet. Maybe.
I don't even know how that many people. And it was so hot.
Had I laid down on the floor, like my head would have almost touched one wall and my feet almost touched the other. So we start getting these massages, and and it's hot. It is so hot. It's miserably hot.
don't want people's hands touching you.
Right.
But that we pay for them to.
And at this point, we're committed. We're going to see it through, right? Right? I mean, with a naked couple, us, 4 massage therapists. I'm not sure they were licensed.
Because they probably don't have licenses.
I don't know.
For that. Anyway.
Regardless, we start getting the massage, and so the women in broken English are trying to give us instruction, right? And so they would try to say flip over, and there'd be like one word in Spanish and one word in English. She barely speaks any English. I barely speak any Spanish, so we're having a hard time communicating. And normally when I go get a massage, I communicate with the massage therapist ahead of time. Please don't touch my feet. I hate having my feet touched, right? And I didn't know how to communicate that, right?
What's a foot in Spanish?
Right. And so I'm just like, okay, well, maybe she won't touch my feet. Well, I thought wrong. And so after it was all said and done, she goes down toward my feet. She touches the bottom of my foot. I'm so ticklish. And so I just jerk it out of the way, and she goes, ooh, that tickle? And that was it for me, and I lost it. And I was on the verge of cackling, but I didn't want to offend, so I just tried to stifle my laughter. And after it was said and done, no one saw our goodies.
Nope.
And it wasn't the worst massage that I've ever had.
The lady kept whispering in my ear trying to get us to go longer. And I kept saying no.
Oh, yeah.
And she was one of the main ladies, and she spoke better English. My lady did. And she kept trying to get me to go for longer. And I was like, lady, I'm trying to get out of what I'm doing right now. I certainly don't want to lay here for longer. And I was like, no, thank you. No, thank you. And so finally, when it was all over, I was like, praise Jesus that we got through this.
Yeah. So that was number 1. That's just the first one.
First time. I should have learned the lesson.
The second time, we were in St. Louis. Yeah. And you look at me and you're like, hey, we're going to get a massage. And I'm like, cool, let's go get a massage.
Why you trust me?
I know. And so
it was like a foot spa. Like an Asian foot spa type of place.
But I didn't know that.
You did not. You had no idea.
So we show up at this place. The only English word that they know there is hello, and they answer the phone. And I think they said something like, you can come now. That's about it. And again, there's a language barrier, and I don't know how to communicate, right? I'm really good at like Pig Latin, and that's about it. That was my first language, my mother tongue, if you will. And so this place, it's not quite as sketchy because it's a freestanding building and not a shed, but it's not a whole lot better once you get inside. So the massage rooms are separated by like shower curtains.
Yeah. And of course, big gaps when you close those as well.
Right. So you walk in, and it's just, there's a hallway created by like, You know when you take your car to the shop and they just like roll it into a bay? That's kind of what it felt like in this place.
We got rolled into a bay.
Yeah, into a massage bay. And they would just pull the curtain closed, which didn't really, cover a whole lot. So again, thankfully I was not asked to get naked this time, nor did I have to. But the coverings were still pretty small. So
yeah, and we got a couples massage, and it was a tiny little room, and so our beds were side by side. They were touching.
Yeah.
It was like we were laying on like a queen size bed.
That's awkward.
And there was no room.
Yeah.
Around the edges. Yes. And so the ladies were on the bed, on top of the bed to massage us.
And there's no communication that happens with an Asian foot spa massage, right? So like in Mexico, they were at least trying to like communicate and tell us what they were doing, right?
Or move your arm here or do this.
Right. And so, or they would at least do it for us gently. So like if you've ever had a massage in the United States, a traditional, like, I guess, American massage, if that's a thing, like it's very calm and they speak like softly like this. And they're like, okay, I'm going to move your arm now. You ready to flip over? There was none of that. No. I did get the word flip. She grabbed us or she grabbed me and just said flip, and I got flipped. And so she was strong. I'll give her that. And that was about the extent of it. And so I had no idea what was going on the entire time. It was very awkward. She did touch my feet, and I was afraid of her because she was doing what she was doing with a purpose. And so I just took it.
Like a man.
Like a man.
Yeah. No choice. They were very forceful in what they did, and they didn't tell you. They just kind of did it.
Yeah.
And or told you what they were doing as they did it, but not for permission. We're just like giving you instructions.
Right.
It was also very painful.
Yes.
And I told her to lighten up a couple of times, and I'm not sure if she understood what I was asking or not.
Yeah.
But one time she laughed at me because I told her to lighten up because I don't like a head massage.
Right.
And I was like, I'm paying to literally be tortured right now.
Yeah.
And I don't like this. But it was also cheap.
Yes.
Not as cheap as Mexico, but it was
pretty close.
Pretty cheap.
Yeah. It was an experience.
Love lessons. Friends, if you all have any recommendations and places or types of massages that we can get, I'm down to try it. That might not be, but I'll drive them along. I have one question for you.
Okay.
But did you die?
It was close.
Was it?
Yeah. I will never get the image out of my head of walking into the massage shed in Mexico. It's not a good core memory.
Hopefully the Lord can redeem that for you at some point. Do you think we need to go back to Mexico to see if we have a better experience in that shed?
No, I'm not going back to the shed. Stop trying to drag me into the shed. Today's love note focuses on that myth that our spouse should be everything that we need, or they should meet all of our needs. The reality is our spouse can't do that, and we can't do that for our spouse. And so in marriage counseling, I encourage people, do what Scripture says, what Paul instructed us to do, to outdo one another in honor. Right? If we are so focused on meeting our spouse's need and our spouse in return is so focused on meeting our needs, we can create a really beautiful relationship. The problem is if we don't know how to meet their need and to help them get their need met, then we're still setting our relationship up for failure. So Gary Chapman wrote a book several years ago called The 5 Love Languages. And in it, he explains how if we are loving our spouse in the way that we want to be loved, in the way that we need to get our needs met, then we're still not loving them out of a need to serve them. We're loving them out of the way that we want them to serve us. And so if you have never heard of the 5 love languages, if you've never explored this on your own, I've posted a link in today's show notes with a free quiz that you can take to understand what your love language is and what your partner's love language is. And when the two of you come together, you seek to meet the other person's need through loving them through their love language. It creates a really beautiful relationship of two happy people who have needs that are getting met rather than trying to meet our own need in the way that we understand.
All right, I've got that love note. Jot it down now. Can I go?
You got somewhere you gotta be?
I think go to Starbucks.
I'm gonna make a love note just about Starbucks.
Oh, goodness. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in to episode 4. Be sure to go give us a follow on our Facebook page, and we will see you next time.
Take care.
Thanks
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of the Love Lessons Podcast. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. That helps others find the show, and we greatly appreciate it. Once again, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.